Hello, and welcome to our inaugural recorded workshop for the Fulbright U.S. Student Grant. My name is Jennifer Bess. I'm Director of National Fellowships here at the University of South Carolina, and this presentation is going to go through some big picture overview of what the Fulbright grants are, what they offer, what applications look like, and then a few specifics about what the application process looks like specifically on our campus. So bear with me as we go through all these slides, and apologies in advance if there are any dog noises in the background. So the Fulbright program was established in 1946 by the US Congress, and as you can see, its really essential goal is to increase mutual understanding between people in the US and the other countries that partner with the US in the Fulbright program. So while there are many different types of things you can do with a Fulbright grant, the ultimate purpose is to have Americans have real lived experience for sustained periods of time in other countries to increase mutual understanding. You can see as a result, it's sponsored by the Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, administered by IIE in the US, and overseas, it's a combination of binational commissions, but also US embassies, depending on the relationships that the countries have with Fulbright. Two of the main things that Fulbright is hoping for in this ambassadorial quality is to represent accurately the diversity of Americans. So they are looking for a really wide variety of applicants. They're really encouraging applicants from underrepresented backgrounds. And then you'll also note point two, that inclusion is the second piece. So really, whoever you are, wherever you are from, Fulbright is really interested in helping send you abroad so that people have a fuller understanding of what quote unquote Americans are. In terms of general eligibility, so we're targeting working with graduating seniors. We also work with recent alumni fairly frequently, and we are more than happy and encourage graduate students at USC to apply. To be eligible to apply for a Fulbright, you have to be a US citizen, given the nature of the program and where the funding comes from, by the application deadline. You also have to have your bachelor's degree by the start of the grant. So this is why graduating seniors are the earliest point in which you can apply for these. You also cannot have your doctorate at the time of application. So that's for grad students to keep in mind as well. The final point on this slide is there are country-specific requirements. And this is a refrain that you're going to hear from us again and again, that Fulbrights are really country-specific in terms of the types of grants that they offer, the types of applicants that they're looking for, the types of support that they might offer. There's a wide variety, right? Because each Fulbright is a partnership between the US and a particular country. So this presentation will focus on the things that all of them share in common, but it's up to you to really be mindful of reading all of the details on the website for the specific country to see what their specific eligibility requirements are. But after all that, what the heck is a US Student Program Award for Fulbright? So on this slide, you'll see that there are two basic categories that Fulbright divides these awards into. I would say from these two categories come actually four different types of grants. Three come under Section 1, and then one comes under Section 2. So, this is the big overview, and then I'm going to go into some details about each of those four types of grants. So on the left-hand side, we have type 1 study research grants. So this is about 950 awards. They last about an academic year in length. There are a lot of countries that offer these, 140 plus. In this category, you have study grants, which are studying for master's degrees. You have research grants, which are independent research projects that you propose. And then you also have creative arts grants, where you can practice a particular creative art for a year. So those are the three that kind of fall under that category. In the second category, you have English teaching assistantships, or ETAs. You're going to hear ETAs thrown around a lot. This is the largest number of awards, 1,250 plus, same academic year length. Fewer countries offer these, but there are several countries that have really large programs and well-established programs. And the purpose of the ETA is for you to go in and help teach English as a native English speaker, but also present US culture in the classroom. Again, this is an ambassadorial grant. So you are not the teacher in the classroom in most cases. You are the assistant who is there to help give students a realistic sense of what English sounds like by a native speaker, but also to share your background and interests and Americanness explaining US culture in the classroom. So those are the two big picture categories. I'm going to go into some more detail about each of them. So study awards are still relatively new in Fulbright. A lot more countries are adding them to their offerings, and these support study towards a graduate degree. In 99% of cases, that's for a one-year master's degree. There are a tiny handful of options that might extend to a second or third year of funding from outside Fulbright, or that they are supporting the first year of a grad degree, and then you're expected to fund the remainder if it's longer than a year. And there are a wide range of what those options are for study grants. So some countries say, yep, we'll offer a study grant. You can do any graduate degree at any institution. Just let us know. Other countries say, you can do any graduate degree at these 5 institutions that we have chosen. And then other countries will say, you can choose from these 5 graduate degrees at these 2 institutions. So again, country specific, you have to look and really dig into what is offered. A key piece with the study awards is you still have to apply directly to the graduate program. Fulbright does not do that for you. Fulbright is merely the funding mechanism for this. So most of the time, those applications are happening either in tandem with the Fulbright application or slightly afterwards, which you need to be sure that you are very aware of the deadlines for applying to those graduate programs and do that process yourself. We're going to talk a little bit about affiliation letters. We'll talk in more detail about those with the research grants. In general, affiliation letters are from people on the ground in the country to which you are applying who are willing to be sort of your home base, providing you the resources that you need to accomplish your particular grant. For study awards, they're typically not required because obviously your affiliation is the university to which you are applying for the program. But I would say that study grants are competitive enough that if you can get a letter of affiliation from, say, a faculty member that you are really excited to work with during your grad degree or whose research you're really interested in and that's why you're trying to go to that program, if you can get a letter from them of support that says, should Susie get into this grad program, I'd be happy to work with them and welcome them to my class, that can help you stand out in the competitive field. So affiliation letters are not required, but are very useful. Fulbrights require 2 essays, and the most important of which is the statement of grant purpose. It's a 2-page essay that talks about what that Fulbright year will look like. So in the case of a study grant, you really need to discuss the details of the graduate program. That includes coursework options. It includes, is there a thesis that you'll have to write or some kind of research component? Do you already have an idea of what that would be? Is it a 2-semester program? Is it 3 quarters? You know, what's the time frame of that? And then also importantly, why Fulbright should fund you, right? Because if you're doing a graduate degree, there might be other scholarships that would just give you money. What is it about the nature of the Fulbright program and this emphasis on mutual cultural understanding that makes Fulbright a good fit for funding you for this particular grad degree? That can be a tricky thing to write, but that's an important thing to address. Also, in general, Fulbrights require 3 recommendations. So when you're applying for a study award, obviously at least 1 and really 2 of those should come from professors who can talk about your ability to be successful in graduate level courses. This is a really academic focused grant, and so you need some really academically focused letters. So that's kind of a big picture of some study award details. Research awards. So these are independent research projects that you design, and that can be in any field. We have had successful students doing STEM research in labs. We've also had students researching in various archives, or you know, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do. And it's really your design. These programs really do require affiliation, right? Fulbright needs to know that you have someone on the ground in the country who can help you accomplish this project. And I would certainly tell you that the earlier you can get that affiliation, the more easily the rest of your application will come together. You can build it around knowing this is the person, this is the place that I will be working with. And there's lots of different ways to find affiliation. So for some applicants, it's really easy and obvious because the person or the university or whatever, or the archive is the thing that you want to do and you can't do it without them. So that's how you would pursue your affiliation. But in other cases, you might have a general idea of your project and not really know the best home for it in a particular country. And so I would say you definitely want to start out using the network that you have on campus, particularly with your faculty, right? So faculty usually have a lot of international connections. They know the reputations of programs. And so having conversations with some of the professors that you think might write your recommendations, let them know what you're interested in doing and where you're thinking of, and see if they have any contacts that they can put you in touch with to sort of ease that affiliation process. In the case of research awards, your statement of grant purpose definitely needs to have really specific details of that project, including a timeline, right? You have 8 to 10 months. How are you spending that time? It's gonna, are you doing research first and then writing it up later? Is it all happening simultaneously? Things like that. You want to address the resources that you need. And ultimately, with any Fulbright, you really need to address why do you need to be in that particular country location to do this project, right? What is that connection between your idea and what that country has? You need to be sure that you look at language level requirements. So those vary widely from country to country and even from project to project. So depending on the nature of the work that you're doing, you may require a higher or lower level of the language, of the local language. Fulbright's requirements around that, usually the language is to have a certain level by the time that you arrive in the country. So if you are not yet at, let's say they require intermediate Spanish and you're at, high beginner, you can put a plan in for this year between the application deadline and when you would go for Fulbright of how you will get yourself. It's not that you have to have the language level at the moment of application, but you need a plan, a realistic plan for reaching that. And then in terms of recommendations for research awards, certainly at least one of them should be able to talk about your ability to do independent work, right? So this is, you're going abroad for 9 months to do this project on your own. So having someone who can say, yes, I've worked with them as a research supervisor in the past or on a project, and they are certainly capable of doing this, really helps speak to the feasibility of the project. Research awards. Ooh, Creative Arts Awards. Creative Arts Awards, there's a whole list of categories that will qualify for this. Excuse me. Essentially, this is to spend a year practicing some kind of art form. And there's a huge range. So music, filmmaking, visual arts, creative writing, textiles, all sorts of things. But it's you going and practicing your craft. We don't get a ton of applications for these. I think our most common creative arts and most successful creative arts applicants from UofSC have been in creative writing, but we've had students in music and filmmaking and other areas apply. These certainly require affiliation as well. Again, it's more project-based, so they need to know that someone can be your home base and resource. But it's certainly possible with these to look beyond universities. There might be options with local nonprofits or with museums or galleries, with musical groups, things like that. So there's a slightly wider range of what's acceptable typically. But certainly universities are always a good bet for affiliation. If there's a department that you can connect yourself to, that'd be great. Really, you want to think about why you need to go to that particular country for that particular art form. What is it that you hope to learn by engaging with the community in practicing that art? Do they have a specific style that you're interested in looking at? Are there specific experiences that you want to have that will inform your art? Things like that. So as with the research awards, the statement of grant purpose needs to have a lot of details of the project, definitely needs to have a timeline, and definitely needs to establish the resources that you hope to use in country, whether that's physical resources or a network of connection. Again, your recommendations should confirm your ability in that particular art form. And to go along with that, Creative Arts Awards do require a portfolio of work in that particular genre. So there's a whole page on the Fulbright website that will give you detailed information for each particular art form of what that portfolio needs to entail. It's typically 10 pieces, depending on your form, and they'll give you some idea of how to package that together, and it's an online submission of those materials. Finally, with ETAs, so as I said before, you are serving as a native English speaker in the classroom. You don't tend to have a lot of say in terms of where you're placed in the country, but some countries do allow you to put forward some preferences such as age of student, do you want an urban or rural location? It just really varies by program. So, but the offerings range from, kindergarten through university level. So depending on the country, you want to really look into that. Really varying levels of the local language are required. I mean, your purpose in being there is to be the English speaker. So there are quite a few countries that don't care if you can't speak the local language. They will give you some instruction in that language to help you get by. And that's particularly true of a lot of Asian countries. But a lot of South American countries, you need to have intermediate Spanish in order to be an ETA. So just check the Fulbright website for the particular country to see what they're looking for. ETAs are not really designed for those planning a career in teaching English as a second language, although there's those people are certainly welcome and encouraged to apply. Again, this is an ambassadorial grant for mutual understanding. It's helpful for you to have some teaching or tutoring experience, but that doesn't necessarily have to be your long-term path. You need to have a reason for why teaching English for a year would be useful to you in whatever path you're choosing, but that path does not have to lead to a long-term teaching career. When I say helpful to have some teaching or tutoring experience, there's lots of opportunities on campus. It's especially great if you can work with international students and have some experience that way. But we've had successful students. We had a student a few years ago who was an ETA to South Korea, or no, to Taiwan, I'm sorry, to Taiwan. And her primary teaching experience was as a group exercise instructor, but she was able to talk about how that helped her learn how to adapt lessons depending on who was in her class. Okay, so there's lots of different experiences you can pull from, but they want to know how you think you would function in a classroom and help teach English. So because there are so many options for ETAs, and because it's not something that is necessarily tied to your long-term career goals, you need to think carefully about your reasons for choosing an English teaching assistantship and also the country. So some people come into the application knowing exactly where they want to go and why. Other people say, I just want to teach English for a year someplace. And that's okay, the starting point. And we encourage that, and that's why we're here to have conversations. But ultimately, a successful application is going to have a really solid connection between you and the country that you're going to. Something about that country, really fits your interests and your backgrounds or your curiosities. And so you need to get to that point before you can write a really successful application. As part of the process, we really encourage you to research the educational system in the country that you think you might apply to, because that's going to help you manage expectations as to what the classroom will look like. American classrooms look very different from, say, South Korean classrooms. And so being proactive in knowing about those educational systems is going to be a benefit to you as you write your application, and you're certainly going to get questions about it in the campus process. So, ETAs. I did want to mention right here, there is an enhancement option that you can additionally apply for called the Critical Language Enhancement Award. So these are only for students applying for, I think it's only research study grants. I don't think ETAs qualify, but there's only certain eligible countries and eligible languages. But this is some additional funding that's available for you to apply for that would give you 3 to 6 months of intensive language study, and that can occur depending on the country, either before the official start of your grant or simultaneously with your grant or as the beginning of your grant. So just keep an eye on that list of countries and languages. And if that's something you're interested in, we're happy to help you add that piece to your application. After all that, what does an application look like? So here's a list of components. Sorry, my mouth is getting dry. So there's some basic personal data that Fulbright gathers from you. But the crux of your application are really these 2 essays. So a statement of grant purpose and a personal statement. The statement of grant purpose, 2 pages for research and study grants and only 1 page for an ETA. Personal statement, just 1 page for any type of grant. We talk about these essays as it can be tricky to figure out what goes in which essay, to be honest. There's a lot of overlap. And so one of the major things that our office does in helping you through the process is help you figure out what goes where, okay? But the shorthand version of this is the statement of grant purpose essay is really focused on the Fulbright year, right? What are you planning on doing, where, why, what does that look like, the timeline, the content. It's also the place where you can mention a little bit about community engagement, because Fulbright wants to know, outside of your specific project, how do you hope to involve yourself in the local community? The personal statement is more both past and future, right? It's who are you, where are you headed, why is a Fulbright year of this particular grant the most like a logical next step for you, okay? So this is a grant that's really, they're giving it to you as an individual interested in sending you abroad for this experience. Fulbright certainly cares what you're proposing, but they care more about, are we sending people abroad who will get the most out of the experience in terms of learning from the other culture, but also expressing American culture. So we have in our office past successful Fulbright applications as examples, and we're exploring some ways to share those with you electronically. Currently, you can only see them in the office, but with everything that's going on now, we are going to be trying to put some of those on Blackboard, and I'll talk about that in a minute too. So personal data, essays, then you have the 4-language evaluation and 3 references. So you only need a foreign language evaluation if there's a language requirement for your particular country and type of grant. Usually that's most easily accomplished by your most recent language teacher, but if you haven't taken a language in a while, or it's a kind of an esoteric language, we can help you try and figure out who can do that form. The 3 references, if you're doing a study or research grant, those 3 references are letters of recommendation. There is some guidance on the Fulbright website about what those should entail, but it would be a typical reference letter, but it needs to really be focused on Fulbright. It can't be just a generic, this person walks on water and is wonderful, you should take them. They need to really reference the project, the ideals behind Fulbright for this ambassadorial exchange, things like that. For ETAs, those references are actually a form that is filled out. The sample form is available on the Fulbright website, and I would recommend that you take a look at that to help you think through who would best write that recommendation. For study research, it's most likely that they're going to be faculty. For ETAs, it is not at all necessary that you have 3 professors write those recommendations. You probably want 1 professor who's in the classroom, but the forms really ask about, how have you handled complicated situations or unfamiliar situations? How is your grasp of English? How do you interact with other people? So there's a wide range of people who could speak to that, supervisors from jobs or internships or clubs. So there's, I encourage you to look at that form and think broadly about who you might ask to recommend you for an ETA. Transcripts, you're definitely going to need your UofSC transcript. But if you've done study abroad or had previous college credits, you're going to need those transcripts as well. So start the process of figuring out how to get those. For study abroad, we can often help navigate that with the study abroad office and get copies, but we need to know that you need those. So be in touch about that. And then in the other category, here are these affiliation letters that are typically required for research study grants. And then the supplementary materials that I mentioned, that's the portfolio for the Arts Award, all of which we're happy to help with. So what is Fulbright looking for? That's $1 million question. So we're definitely looking at the quality and feasibility of the proposal. You have about 8 to 10 months. Is that enough time to do what you say you want to do? Is it a project that they think is of interest? There's 2 levels of selection for Fulbright. First, your application is read in the US by a national screening panel that's comprised primarily of US faculty members, really, in the particular areas and regions. They look at your application and they make recommendations. And then if you're recommended by the national screening panel, your application is sent to the country to which you're applying. And then they make the final decision. And those panels we know a lot less about in terms of who's on them. But they're members of the Fulbright Commission or the US Embassy, and so it's at least a mixture, if not purely, people of the country to which you're applying. So you have 2 audiences. You have an American audience and you have a host country audience. So consider that when you are making your proposal in terms of how you are pitching it and whether or not it would be something of interest to the host country for you to do, right? Is this an area that they would like to have some more knowledge about or participation in? So that goes partly to quality. They'll look at your academic or professional record. It is not at all required that you be a 4.0 student to be a Fulbright. But if you're doing a study grant, it's certainly going to help. And the quality of your academic or professional record also speaks to the feasibility of your project. Just keep that in mind. Personal qualifications, language preparation. These preference factors as established by the FFSB. So those are the preferences that the countries have. And if they have strong preferences, those are usually listed on the Fulbright website for that country page. So you shouldn't, it's not a hidden thing what those preferences are, but they do change from year to year. The extent to which the candidate and the project will help to advance the Fulbright program goals, remember, mutual cultural understanding. Is your project going to help that? Keep that in the mind. And then the requirements of the program in individual countries, just what are they looking for, and that desirability of achieving diversity. The Fulbright's looking at the entire applicant pool and as a whole, who are they sending abroad? They want to make sure that. What do you get if you receive a Fulbright? So pre-grant and in-country, they certainly do round-trip airfare, so you can get there and back. There is a monthly stipend that varies widely in terms of amount based on where you're located, but it should be enough for you to live off of for the time that you are there. There are accident and sickness benefits, and then depending on the country and the type of grant, there are these other possible benefits, such as support for dependents, a research allowance, tuition, language lessons, etc. After you're a Fulbrighter, you join the Fulbright Network of Alumni, which is huge and strong. You're a member of the State Department's alumni website. This is a nice perk. If you're a Fulbright alumni, you're eligible for 12 months of non-competitive eligibility status within the government, which means if you apply for a job and they want to hire you, they can just hire you, right? They don't have to look at anybody else. They can just interview you and say, yep, you're the one I want. So if you have a long-term interest in working for the federal government, that can be a pretty sweet benefit. You'll have a lifetime Fulbright email address, so people can always find you, and you'll be a member of the Fulbright Association. This is the big picture application timeline as put forward by Fulbright. We'll talk about ours in a little bit more detail shortly. But right now we're in the design project and prepare application point of the timeline. Our campus deadline is August 19th. Which is, I think it's the Wednesday before classes start fall. The national application deadline is October 6th. So the reason that we have a month and a half in between the national deadline and our campus deadline is because Fulbright asks us to do campus evaluations of every applicant. So to accomplish that, we set up meetings. You will have an individual meeting with about 3 faculty to discuss your application. That's for us to be able to do the evaluation, but it's also meant to be a constructive conversation with you, and they can give you feedback and suggestions for strengthening your application before that final national deadline, okay? The national screening committees meet in November and December and make their decisions. Then in late January, usually you hear if you have been recommended to the country. And then from March through June, you'll start hearing results, and it varies by country. So some countries are really early announcers and some countries are later announcers. I will say that even though this says March through June, about 99% of the countries do their final notifications before April 15th, because that's the deadline for accepting graduate school admission, and Fulbright wants to give you every opportunity to do Fulbright instead of graduate school. So rest assured, you should know by April 15th, but it can really range from March through April 15th. In terms of our campus process, here's a super quick rundown of the starting points. So you're off to a great start right now by listening to this webinar. The next step would be to talk with the National Fellowship Advisor. We are doing a lot of remote advising right now, so please feel free to schedule an appointment. We'll talk with you via phone or Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams. And that conversation is really to help guide you in thinking about what your options are, which type of grant makes the most sense, location, things like that. As I said before, some of you come in with really specific ideas from the get-go, but a lot of people use Fulbright to kind of explore the options. And so we're here to bounce a lot of ideas off of and give you some practical advice based on our experience with working with Fulbright over the years. We do have what we call an intent to apply form. We'll share that link with you. It's also available on our website. We ask that you complete that by April 10th. That covers more than just Fulbright. That's any competition in the upcoming year, but it helps us keep track of interested students so that we don't lose you in the process. Once you've done that form, you'll get sent to the preliminary Fulbright application form, and we'll also send you that link. We ask you to complete that by April 20th. That's just to get a sense of what are you thinking about for Fulbright? Which type of grant are you considering? Which countries are you looking at? What kind of background do you have? It just gives us a little fuller picture of who our applicants are at that point. Once you've completed a preliminary application, we will add you to our Fulbright Blackboard group. This is a new process this year. We're trying out Blackboard as a site that will help us share information with you more easily, and also as a way for you to submit drafts of your application. So there'll be a lot of resources available, but we will add you to that once we have your preliminary Fulbright application. We'll also then assign you a faculty Fulbright advisor. We have about 4 or 5 faculty that help us in this process, and they are really your go-to people for talking through the content of those essays. They'll look at your application as a whole, but their expertise is in thinking through the research proposals, statement of grant purpose, personal statements, things like that. And so you'll work with them throughout the summer as well. Once this year's application opens online on the Fulbright website, which I believe is supposed to be March 31st, you should register. Go ahead and create your application. When you create that application, please note that you're applying to the University of South Carolina. As long as you do that, we have access to your application at all times in the system. And so you can submit things to us and we can return them to you and we can help track your letters and things like that. So please make sure that you select University of South Carolina, not apply at large. We're going to have monthly deadlines throughout the summer, and we'll ask you to submit drafts once a month through Blackboard or the online system. We're still working that piece out. And that's to really make sure that we've seen at least 2 or 3 or 4 drafts before you submit your application for us to review at the campus level. So that's the final piece, number 8 here, submit your complete application, which includes letters of recommendation, by August 19th. The reason that we want the complete application at that point is that we do need to do this campus evaluation, and the fairest way to evaluate you is to have a complete application. So it's hard for us to accurately evaluate you if you're missing a lot of pieces. We will also, not on this list, we're hoping to have 4 working sessions over the summer. So our draft deadlines are going to be on Mondays. The Fridays before those, we will have working sessions where if you were in the Columbia area, we're happy to sit down with you and look at your essays and give some feedback to you. So that's the big picture process. There'll be more details for what happens after August 19th forthcoming. In terms of resources, this is a screenshot of what the Fulbright website looks like. Please note us.fulbrightonline.org is the website you want. You want the U.S. Student Program. You don't want the Scholar Program. That's for faculty, so don't get confused. Fulbright redid their website last year, and they have this nice page on application tips. They're going to give you details about what goes particularly into the essays, but essentially into every piece of the application. So I recommend that as a good site to start looking at when you're ready to sit down and start drafting. Here's some information about National Fellowship Advising at UofSC. So you can use Navigate to make an appointment with us. For right now, with the closure of campus, we're happy to make remote appointments available. So phone, Microsoft Teams, Skype, Zoom, just let us know what you would like to do and we're happy to use that format. Undergrads can do that. If you're a grad student or alumni, you can't use the Navigate system, so just email us and let us know you want a meeting and what type, and we'll go from there. We encourage you to visit our website, and if you need to contact us, there's our couple additional grants I just wanted to mention here at the end. We don't get a lot of applications for these, but I don't want to ignore them. So Fulbright Fogarty Fellowships in Public Health, these are some really specific awards to specific countries. They're especially looking at students who are currently enrolled in med school or are graduate students in global health, public health. So if you fall in that category and one of these countries looks interesting and projects are interesting to you, we're happy to help you apply for that. It's the same application process. It's just a special award. Finally, the Fulbright National Geographic Storytelling Fellowship, which everyone wants to do because who wouldn't want to work with National Geographic? So they've changed the process for this. Essentially, you apply for a study research grant, and then this is like an additional component to that. They're looking for people with experience in digital storytelling. And so we can talk more about this if you're interested in it. This is a very excellent award that gets a ton of applicants and only has about 8 slots. So we can talk with you about whether it makes more sense to do a creative arts application that then could just transition to National Geographic if you decide that you want to apply for that instead. So we'll help with that. I should note in general, for Fulbright, you can only apply for one type of award to one country in any given cycle. So you've got to make your choice wisely. Here's the Fulbright contact information. They have a bunch of resources, right? They are really interested in helping you make the best decision about applying for Fulbright and creating an application that's strong and will get you the award. So they have their own webinars. Their website is very extensive. There's a lot of information. They've got videos. They're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So make sure you stay in touch with them. And I think that's the end of the PowerPoint. I just want to say in addition, so essential next steps would be go ahead and schedule a meeting with the National Fellowship Advisor. Please explore the Fulbright website. What's on the website right now is for this past competition cycle, but it should be updated March 31st because that's when the new application will open for the 2021-22 academic year. Let us know if you're thinking of applying by filling out that ITA form. You can find that on our website. It's in the National Fellowship side of the website. In the applicant toolbox is the link to the ITA form. We'll also be sure to share that with you all. And I just want to say that we're very excited and looking forward to working with you on Fulbright. Thanks so much for listening.